Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. It's a beautiful day in Philadelphia today, man. I know you're not in Philly, but I'm sure it's nice there. It's like 60 degrees. I was walking to class today, and I'm like, wow, it feels like fall. It feels like academia. I feel like I'm actually in school right now rather than it be 95 degrees. But of course, I'm here with Sean Bernard. What is going on?
Yeah, man, we are so back, and Sixers are
Yeah.
back, and I'm excited. My juices are back flowing again. I think I'm officially over my depression from the offseason, and I'm excited about the team that's there at camp, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, man. Media day was weird, and we're gonna talk a lot about that. There's a massive elephant in the room, and we're gonna discuss that obviously. But for the most part, I got a lot of like pretty good vibes. And I just reminded every single day, like we'll talk extensively about Joel Embiid, but his press conference, man, was one of the best showings of maturity and who Joel Embiid is as a person to me that I've seen from him basically ever. I was very encouraged by the way he spoke about the situation.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, honestly, it's just been so cool when we think back to his whole time here in Philly when he came here as the little kid out of college who was shooting a shot at Rihanna and tweeting at
Yeah.
LeBron and doing all his trolling and putting Andre Drummond on blast for the whole internet to see. To think back to like the mature person that he's developed into and to handle such a really difficult situation and just take it in stride, answer questions thoughtfully, give real replies, real responses, and honestly, everything came out so perfect. And we're so lucky to have Joel Embiid. So lucky that he is the face of our franchise. And as long as he's here, the Sixers always have a chance. So
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that he's the guy and thrilled that he's the one that is the face of our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I was totally encouraged by him and the way that he handled it all. And it's obviously got to be a very difficult situation for him just to deal with as, the guy here that's, has nothing to do with really the situation at hand. And he really has to be the one to deal with it. So we'll get into him in a little bit, but we're going to go through basically what we took away from each player and obviously Doc and Daryl. So we'll talk about all of them. So Sean, set me up here. Let's start from the top. What'd you take away from that first set?
Yeah, so first off, it was an interesting media day as far as I was lucky enough to be able to be in the Zoom interview portion of it. So it was split between people on Zoom and people there in person. So they're still keeping it small as far as a crowd. But it was very interesting to kind of, it felt like being a fly on the wall in there. And I still had a chance to get a couple questions and stuff, but it was for sure more focused more toward the media there, which is 100% fair. But
Yeah.
that was definitely a cool experience to be a part of. Doc and Daryl took the stage first. And just as we expected, the Ben Simmons questions were there off the rip. The first thing that I took of note was that Daryl confirmed that Simmons did request a trade in Chicago shortly following the season. And again, that's been around and pretty common knowledge, but just to hear that from Daryl, I thought was important to note. Doc also extremely high on Andre Drummond, which is a little concerning to me. And the belief there is that still Simmons will return. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard to actually gauge what is saving face and what's trying to what Doc and Daryl are doing to set up their portion of a trade or their portion of what they're trying to attack in a trade. And just trying to create value there to assume that they're gonna just wait it out. But a lot of it actually seemed serious. And maybe this is just Daryl being, poker face, great at his job and what he does, and that could totally be true. But I mean, obviously, you don't expect Simmons to really play for the Sixers again, but there might be an expectation that he shows up to camp just to make the ability to trade him a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl, I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me from Maury was that he said if he doesn't show up, it's spelled out pretty clearly in the collective bargaining agreement and his contract what will happen. So I think that Daryl is smarter than everyone in the basketball world, and he knows how to play this. And I don't think he seemed very unfazed, which was surprising to me, I guess. But I think Morey did a very good job of kind of keeping himself quiet for the most part and not having to answer too many questions, but definitely playing his cards correctly when the questions were directed at him.
Yeah, for sure. And again, he's so poker face, so just nothing phases him. Can look and not blink at the questions flying his way, which is awesome to have that and have him in charge and be able to handle things that way. One quote that was specifically interesting to me, which is a little away from Ben Simmons, is Maury said, "quote While we're on the upswing, most of the teams that we are chasing and are behind us are headed in the other direction. which I thought was interesting. And what do you think about that as the state of the Sixers? He talked a lot
So
about like the youth for it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
yeah, I mean, like the more and more that it's talked about, the more and more that we see from him, and obviously you and I from the jump, really we go back to this a lot. Like Tyrese Maxey was our guy going into the draft last year. I would love to see the clip of you and I getting excited during the PSN stream when Maxey got picked. But like, really, it seems like they're kind of banking on the fact that Tyrese Maxey is going to be the future of this franchise, which I could totally see, first of all. And second of all, like other guys in the mix, whether it be Isaiah Joe or Paul Reed or what they see from those two guys. And then on top of that, you do have some other guys, in Matisse, who's still young, Furkan, who's still young, and a bunch of like, they are not old for the most part. And
Mhm.
I don't know that it's necessarily true that other teams are on the downswing, but like Brooklyn Nets, Los Angeles Lakers, even the Bucks are a little bit older, so it does make sense that they're saying that. Um, I'm the only thing that not concerns me necessarily, but the only thing that holds me back from like buying into that totally is the fact that this team is kind of on like two different trajectories in terms
For
of like
sure.
Embiid isn't necessarily like Embiid is at his peak right now. We're seeing prime Embiid, and we're still kind of waiting for Maxi and those guys to put it all together. So while they are they aren't necessarily on the downswing, their best player, their franchise player, and the guy that's going to dominate all season, who I really am excited to talk about, Joel isn't necessarily on, um, like he doesn't have a ton of years left. So, but I do agree. I guess I do agree in terms of like the guys that they do have, um, and the guys that are in house that I'm very excited for Maxi.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me that like obviously there was the Embiid, Tobias, and Maury and Doc were the main ones, and then besides that, Tyrese Maxey was the guy that
Yeah.
got all the attention there, and there's a ton of pressure and expectations being thrown on this 20-year-old kid, and yes, I believe he's ready, but it's kind of insane to me just how quick
Yeah.
that shifted, and obviously we saw him getting a run with the first team at training camp, which I don't think that's a surprise to anybody at
Nope.
this point, but pretty surprising to me, I guess, just how quickly the expectations have ramped up for him and that he's now kind of being looked at as the guy so quick. But I'm thrilled. And also, if Joel Embiid was not a part of this franchise, I definitely think there would be kind of a building around this young core that we have.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit like definitely a little bit of not quite connection there. But that being
Yeah.
said, like Embiid is good enough that we still need to do everything possible to compete right now. And let's touch on him for a little bit. So, Embiid, his clearest message was that he was just disappointed in the situation, disappointed that it's got to this point with Simmons, and he made it very clear that he wanted him back. One of the things in this quote, he said, if I didn't like playing with him, I'm honest, I would say it." And he stood up there, he wanted him. He said, "I'm disappointed. Look at what we've been able to do." And he also said, "Of course we want him back. He's a big piece of what we've been building the past few years." He didn't take back his comments after the post games, which I thought was interesting. We've heard about like which this has for sure been more made out of it than in actuality of him throwing Simmons under the bus. And the way he put it, which he said like, I thought that was the turning point of the game. I've gone back and rewatched it and still believe that. And honestly, it's just as big a criticism on Matisse for missing the free throws than Ben for making the pass, which is all super valid. And I like that he stood by that. And I thought he took all the chin music great. So what were your thoughts on Embiid?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, he took everything in stride, did everything very professionally, but there was so much like he was raw. He went in there and he completely said exactly what he felt the entire time, and like that's all you can ask from him. But he didn't mince words at all. I thought he did a great job of not only saying like this is like I feel like for Joel and a guy that's has been the brunt of a lot of criticism and has been, this team goes as far as Joel Embiid goes, if we're being honest, especially now, but really just in the grand scheme of things, as far as Joel Embiid can carry them is as far as they'll go. And he took a lot of that on himself to start. Like, I could have been a lot better. Tobias could have been a lot better. And I don't think that he has any problem saying that because he doesn't have any problem hearing that. You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
for him to go out there and just be completely honest, I thought it was great for him and for the like just for the team in general, for him to say like, you know what, I don't really care. I'm gonna say how I feel. Tobias has always said how he feels. We're very honest with each other, and if that's really hurting feelings, then like I don't know what to say because he's been just as supportive, more so supportive of the team, specifically Ben and the team, than he's ever been critical of them. So
Yeah.
I thought it was perfectly fine and better than fine for him to go out to say exactly how he felt in that situation.
Yeah, one of the things I've always really liked and respected about Joel Embiid is when he's asked a question, he doesn't give like a kind of by the book or like whatever response. Like he gives a real
Yeah.
reply for what he thinks and puts it very articulately in the way that he wants it. And it's just very self-aware of the situation and everything. And even one example of this that he talked about during media day was he's just talking about the business aspect of things and how obviously that's so important in basketball. And he said, "What if the Warriors call and offer Steph and Clay for me? Do you think the Sixers do it? They have to." And he's like, "If I was in
Yeah.
charge, I would do that too." And I think
Yeah.
that's cool to just have that level of self awareness and just reasonable about the whole situation. Do you have a goal for Joel heading forward into this year?
Well, dude, and me and a couple of my friends were talking about it today because I was looking
Mhm,
through Twitter this morning and I saw the Lauren Rosen interview with Joel and him saying
mhm.
like I can be so much better. I was good. He said I felt I did pretty okay last year,
Which is crazy.
and which is insane. And I did actually go back and look at his stats. And I'm like, well, 28 and a half on 52% from the field and 38% from three, and 86% from the line. Like it doesn't get much better than that specifically for a player his position. But honestly, like when I'm looking at it, if this offense is genuinely more catered to him, if
Hmm.
your point guard is Tyrese Maxi, like he's gonna have more space. He's gonna have just an offense that works around him even more so than it did last year. Like I don't even know, man. Is he gonna be better this year than he was last year? He looks like he's in great shape. The first thing I said when
Yeah,
he sat down was like, "Oh my god, he looks ripped."
his
Like
shoulders
he
looked awesome. Like, yeah, and
and he's more unguardable than like I think the list of unguardable players in the league right now is like Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid. Like it's right there.
mhm. And one thing, like when we sit back and think about this whole Simmons and Embiid dynamic that we've talked about so much, Joel Embiid has certainly made sacrifices to help
Mhm.
incorporate Ben in the game. When we think about him expanding his range, shooting threes, and shooting more threes is another thing that he talked about that maybe he
Yeah.
needs to do, which is interesting. He shot 3 attempts last year, which I don't know. At this point, I'm not going to doubt anything that Joel Embiid says, but that he has made those sacrifices for Ben that obviously at this point doesn't look like he needs to make moving forward. So it'll be interesting for me to see just exactly how things change with the offense this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I was just thinking about it earlier, and a couple of us were talking about like, oh, and I don't even want to get into a potential Ben trade situation because we've talked about that a ton, but like,
Mhm.
De'Aaron Fox came up in a minute, like, and obviously, like, that would be, I love De'Aaron Fox, don't get me wrong, and someone's like, oh, well, he's not a good 3-point shooter. I'm like, well, he took 5.5 per game last year, and if like just thinking about what Maxi could do, if he's taking 3 per game this year, even 2.5, like that's more so than what Ben was doing. And like if Joel Embiid is willing to, and he said he wants to shoot more threes, like there is like just thinking of the dynamic aspect to this offense and creating so much space where like you didn't have that. Like Tobias said he was working on threes off the bounce, and like if Embiid has space and they can't double, like who are they going to double off of if Maxi is shooting well off catch and shoot threes? If Tobias is shooting well from catch and shoot and off the dribble threes, and then you have Danny Green who's a 40% shooter, Seth Curry who's a freaking 45% shooter, like it's scary. And as much as like their defense takes a hit, they're like you've said it before. Joel Embiid is an anchor. He mentioned that himself. Like he wants to be defensive player of the year. Like honestly, if Ben Simmons is not on this team, I don't know as if they're going to be as good just necessarily because gives you so much, but Joel Embiid might have by far the best year of his career if he has the freedom and the space to reign do whatever he wants to do because he
Mhm.
had that last year, but there was times where it was clogged and you have to get somebody else involved. Like if
Yeah.
it's Joel Embiid and everyone else on both sides of the ball, he might win MVP Defensive Player of the Year. He has the ability to do both.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to bring me to my goal for Joel is simply be Joel Embiid. And for most of these guys, I have kind of a more baseline thing. But
Yeah.
for Embiid, I just want to see him be you this year. And I don't think last year was a fluke by any means. I think you're well
No.
capable of that. That's the guy you are. And I think from now to solely put the franchise in the direction of Joel as our guy, and not that it hasn't been that way, but just without any sacrifice towards Simmons and without any decision elsewhere, I just want to see Joel be Joel.
Do you think that if this whole thing, Ben leaves, ends up somewhere else, regardless of what the trade package is in return, do you think that Joel Embiid sits back and there's like a ton of weight off of his shoulders?
Like as the trade happens.
Like if, the after Ben is gone, everything's done. And I'm not even talking about like just this whole offseason and everything that's going on. I'm talking about just the fact that like he's had to defend Ben. He's had to go out of his way and change the way that he plays. Like, do you think that he is like relieved at the end of this all?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a deep breath from the whole organization. And I think from Joel specifically, I think Joel has more of a right than anyone on the team to be hurt by
Yeah.
Simmons' kind of decisions in here. And especially you hear the reports of him like not wanting it being too built around Embiid and stuff like that, which is ridiculous for it.
Yeah.
And in the end of all this, like this has to come out as a bad look on Simmons. When you think about a guy
Yeah, it does.
who doesn't want to play for a guy who's a top tier NBA star on a perennial contender team with like we've done everything possible. I just
Yeah.
don't think I can't see this not coming back on Simmons on some way. And I think Embiid's the guy that for sure has the most right to be upset by it.
Yeah. And I do want to say something because I feel like this is going like I'm at the point now, obviously, we know how I feel about Ben as a player. Like, this is terrible on his end. 100%. He is by far in the wrong in this situation. And not even the fact that he doesn't want to play for the Sixers anymore. And I feel like that's the where it's getting mixed up is like everyone got really upset yesterday, and I tweeted about it because I think it's ridiculous. Basically, the report came out that said like Ben doesn't think that he's optimized in an offense with Joel Embiid. And like people were like, "What the hell? Are you serious? How could you say that? Blah blah blah." Is he right? Like that's everything that everyone has been saying for years. And I know that it's stupid for him to go about the way that he's gone about it. But is he wrong? He's not wrong. Like
No,
this is what people have been saying, and I don't know why people got so upset about that.
yeah, I mean, again, I think this is the saying it like this to me is much more of a insult to Embiid than I guess just like talking about how like
Yeah,
it like again, don't have an issue with him even requesting a trade. Like I think this has been a long time coming. It's not the most surprising thing in the world. It's just the matter of all this is going down that leaves such a
right.
sour taste for everybody. But I'm happy that the team here is starting to move on in training camp. So I guess we'll hop to the next Tobias Harris. So right back to Ben. I'll quote here. Quote, Ben's still a part of our team. He's still our brother. So we hope the situation get resolved. And if it doesn't, we move on. Tobias also confirmed the flight attempt that they were trying to fly out to California and talk to him that Ben rejected. And as far as his offseason, he worked on his body movement and shooting threes off the catch and contested, which I like to hear.
I love Tobias, bro. I really do. And his approach to that press conference was also very telling to me. He seemed fed up. He seemed
Yeah.
pretty done. I'm not gonna lie. And like again, he's a guy that I feel very much has the right to be upset with the situation because of the fact that he was very much in a similar situation. And obviously he's not, he wasn't the number one overall pick. He wasn't coming into the city with so much expectation, blah, blah, blah. But like Tobias got paid, Tobias played like shit, and he got so much better last year. Like
Yeah.
he got so much better, and he did, he put his head down. You didn't hear anything from Tobias, and he came back and he was a much better player. So I think that Tobias seeing that situation and the how much he means to the team, and that's something Joel did say this morning in that same interview, and how much he respects Tobias and how much he's very real with him and the team and what he expects. And if he's upset about something, he's not going to be quiet about it. He's going to let you know. And like I think that that's the biggest thing right now is that there is such a like stab in the back feeling. It's for a guy like Tobias who is so transparent about how he feels and what he looks for. And same thing with Joel, like we said earlier, like he's so honest about the way that he feels about the game and his teammates and everything that like it seems like Ben kind of, season ended, he went away, didn't talk to anybody, and now it's like they probably will never play together again. And there was never any chance of reconciliation. There was never any talk to those guys. And for Tobias to handle it the way he did, I thought it was perfect. And like Tobias is a hard worker. Tobias is a dude that doesn't really care about anything else, and I think he fits this city really well. And I'm very glad that the tides have kind of shifted on the viewpoint of Tobias Harris.
Yeah, and again, he's a great guy to be the leader of the team and kind of a not a counter to Joel, but just they have different approaches as far as their styles of addressing people and things like that. And one of the things Tobias talked about is just how so much of this Ben situation is just with miscommunication and things that like aren't necessarily the way or they're portrayed not necessarily the way they are in reality. And he talked about that if he thought or if he knew it was going to get to this extent, that he would have had the whole team fly out there the day after the season ended, which I thought was cool on his end. And he also said that he had been in contact with Ben several times and talked to him. And I also respect that he wouldn't answer what that was
I
about or
was
anything.
very happy. I was
Yeah,
very
me
happy
too.
about that.
I think that's a good look on his part. I do think Tobias is a stand up of a guy as they come, and it's cool to have him in his city. And then getting back to basketball, do you have any goals for Tobias for this upcoming season?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for Tobias and this team specifically is that he gets his 3-point attempts up to like 5. Like in LA, his best 3-point shooting year, he was taking 5 per game. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah,
last year he shot 40%, which is fantastic. Exactly what you need from him, but you need more than 3 per game from that spot. And like maybe less so if Ben's not here. But I think again to really optimize Joel and the opportunities that I think Tobias passed up a lot of threes last year. Like
yeah,
I think there was a lot of opportunities for him to catch and shoot, which he didn't. And there are a lot of times for him to on a screen and roll or whatever it is, pick and pop. Like I think that for him, like if he's taking 5 per game instead of 3, he'll get his average up to 23 points per game. And like that is a huge difference from 19 and a half to 23. Like that is huge. And I think that I like without exaggerating at all, I think he's very capable of that.
yeah. I have the exact same goal down. I put over 5 3-point attempts per game, and he's done that 3 times in his career. He had his career high of 5.8 attempts per game, and then in 2018 19 and 2019 20, he both had 5 attempts a game with the Sixers, and then shot 39.4% last year. On 3.4 attempts, and there was a dip after the All-Star break for the how much the attempts were going up, which I think that needs to change. He went from 4.1 to 2.6, and if he can just stay consistent, even in the fours, would be awesome. But there is going to be
Yeah.
an additional load thrown on Tobias because of the absence of Ben, and he talked about how he might even take more of an initiator role this year, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, but like in LA, he did do that. Like I
Yeah,
think, and maybe this is what it takes. You know what I mean? And it's not even necessarily like the next guy up mentality for these guys because they did take obviously like a very big offensive role last year, like Tobias did. But just kind of tweaking what you do and changing the way that you attack the game and finding out that you're like Tobias finding out that he could be like a 22 and like 22 6 and 4 guy is like I think he's capable of that. I think he really is. And Tobias, I think, gets this kind of like rep of like, he's capped out or whatever. He's still young, bro. Like
yeah,
he's still not old. He's just now entering his prime. And as much as I've never really been too high or too low on Tobias. I feel like I've just kind of been in the middle. Coming into the season, I'm much higher on Harris going into this year than I have been on any of the previous years that he's played for us.
yeah. I mean, I'm super hopeful for Tobias. Uh, I've been happy with his time here overall, and like
Yeah.
I still think there's more, which I think is cool, and it'd be cool to see him as a passer. I know you said not really a next man up mentality, but the guy that is going to get the nod is Tyrese Maxi coming up next. Some of the takeaways from Maxi during that. First off, he talked about. I thought it was cool that it was kind of acknowledged that his relationship with Ben is a little different from everybody, just because he said like their connection with Clutch, their connection with Chris Johnson hoops, and he said he knew him before the draft. And his quote on Ben was, "I love him like a brother. It's a great relationship." And he also mentioned that they talk about their dogs a lot, which I thought was cool. And then another thing that made me happy is on the report that he wanted out of Philly or wanted to be connected to Ben in the trade out of Philly. Quote from Tyrese, "That wasn't true. I don't know where that came from. I love being here." And he said he had a laugh with Rich Paul about it coming out. So your thoughts on that?
Uh, I mean, that made me happy. That made me very happy to hear. Like he's just he very much is just like joy in a human being, and
Mhm.
it's a refreshing, like new, nice thing for. I mean, especially for a kid. Like he's a kid. Like he's literally younger than me and
Yeah,
you. I think so. Like
yeah,
it's kind of crazy to think about him being in this situation, and there's a lot of pressure on him, but he seems to just be taking it in stride, and a lot of time. I mean, I saw him say like pressure isn't a real thing for him, and like to go back to his quote with Ben, like it's so hard for a guy like that to kind of even digest the situation. Like he's been in the league for a year, in a year where like it was completely different than other years, and like the draft process was different. His first season, he didn't even get a training camp, like all that stuff. So like I think it's very difficult for him to even gauge what like the magnitude of the situation. So him being able to handle it the way that he did was very good. And like I think the thing is, and a lot of time what gets lost in all of this is the fact that this is their actual job. Like
yeah,
he's showing up to work every day, and being friends with someone that's like being friends with a guy like Ben who's having, organizational issues. And I really don't think this has anything to do with like any of the guys on the team. And like same, it was consistent with what Tobias said, consistent with what Maxi said. Like they're still gonna be friends. This sucks, but like, he spent a lot of time with him. They share interests, like their dogs and everything. Like, it's like I don't like that there was pressure on him to kind of maybe there really wasn't, but like it felt like there was pressure for him to say like, oh, I know this much about Ben. Like they
Hmm.
just play basketball together. That's all they do. Like they're not
Yeah.
chilling with each other all the time. Like they know each other. They've played basketball with each other for a while. They go to open runs. They work with the same trainer, so they see each other at work. Like you know what I mean? Like that's what they're
Yeah.
work friends.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, he's just like a puppy dog personality, Maxie. So
Yeah.
every time he talks, I just love listening. And he definitely saw a little more bulk in him, looked a
Yep.
little bigger, which was good to see. And like, I'm thrilled that he's the guy stepping into this role, and just super excited for what he's going to bring. Do you have any specific goals for him for the season?
Yeah. I mean, if he's gonna start, which again I'm super excited about, just because he's such a joy to watch. Like he really is. He's one of those like, and again, I think he's another dude that Philadelphia is just gonna fall in love with. He's almost like that middle ground between like he's like I think like the way Philadelphia is gonna look at him is like TJ McConnell that was actually very good.
Okay.
Because he's like just such a lovable guy that works so hard and is going to do everything that he can. And I guess I mean for goals for him, it's hard to put like a numerical value on anything that he's going to be able to do because one, like he really didn't have consistent minutes last year, and even when he was playing, like it was only in spurts. So he would have a great run and then he would get taken out, and then it was like we might not see him again for like a little while. So I think honestly, just for like a goal that I have is just for him to look comfortable and for him to play within the role that he has. And it's hard again. It's hard to know what that role is going to be, but alongside like Seth Curry and Danny Green in the backcourt, it's going to be hard to get shots there. And then obviously with Embiid and Tobias in the front court, like also difficult to get shots there. So I want him to be aggressive. I want him to do his thing. And it'll just be interesting to see how he fits in alongside everyone. I'm glad that he's getting like I really am glad. Like if there is a silver lining to all of this, I am happy that it's Maxi getting basically forced into a situation where he can flourish.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as my general goals for him were just to development as a passer and defensively, I think those are the two biggest
Yeah.
areas of his game that would make a difference. And as far as a more kind of trackable one, uh, I'm just putting it as be a top 22 point guard. I think just that's
Yeah.
a top like a quality starter, and that kind of development. Like we can't expect this guy to realistically go from being like a guy who got inconsistent minutes to a focal point of this offense or of this team. But if you can just be like a legitimate starting caliber guard and develop that in a year or two, that's a phenomenal return. And that's like
Yeah.
would be a great accomplishment on his part. So I don't think that's too high of a bar to set for him. And I definitely think he can do it. And I think that would be awesome to count on.
Yeah, I mean, and like again, I think he has that capability, and I think he's so prepared. He's like I've never seen someone have the poise that he has, and just I think he's so willing to work. He's so willing to just he takes those like, and I don't even want to talk about the Eagles right now because it's just, but like him and Jalen Hurts in a lot of ways, like they have that if even if things go bad, like it's just get back to work. And like even if he has a bad game, I feel like he's very similar in that way where just get back to work. I'll see you next game. Like I don't
Yeah.
think that stuff phases him very much. And again, like he has now in this position say like everything remains the same. He remains the starting point guard for this team. Like he's so now I don't want to say protected, but like he's the last option offensively for them, like clearly the last option. So I think him being able to take advantage of those things because he's not the like saying he's the last option on an offense that has like 40+% shooters, the best, like one of the best offensive players in the league, and a 20 point per game scorer in Tobias Harris, like is totally not the worst thing in the world to be like named the last option on that of those five. So it's no disrespect to him at all, but I could really see him like taking advantage of like other teams not really paying attention to him as much.
Yeah, definitely. And then to transition to Danny Green, first off, his quote on Maxi is he was asked, "Is it the way the question was phrased? Is it crazy to expect a guy in year two to take that leap into a starting role. And Green replied, quote, "Not at all, especially when it comes to a kid like him. He's special, and I'm sure everybody can see that. He carries himself like a star, and I believe one day he will be a star," which is awesome to hear from a guy with all the players that he's seen and played with. That kind of praise is awesome. And then also a funny moment with Danny Green is him at the mic when you get a yell from Joel Embiid from the hallway with the, "Hey, Danny, you suck." And then Danny saying how it was because he's still mad that they beat him in pickup the week before, which was awesome. And then the other quick thing that Danny addressed was obviously the turmoil at the beginning of the offseason with the somewhat negative comments about fans. He kind of put that aside and said it was just me learning Philly, which I thought was cool. And he's ready to get back to work. So what are your thoughts on DG?
Yeah, again, another guy that just, like he's very perfect here, I feel like and obviously, like, his relationship with with Joel and Tobias is, like, very clearly good. And the fans comment, I think also got taken out of context, and I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people overreacted to that. I mean, to be expected here. You know, you ever hear of a fan overreacting to a comment? You know, it's just it's very common, and I think it was good of him to kind of not necessarily backtrack, but just basically say like, "I'm past it. We're done. Like we're moving forward." And for him, like the quote with Maxi and everything, like I think that belief system between, Joel has made comments, Tobias has made comments, and then a very clear statement from Danny Green saying how much he believes in Maxi is also another reason why I think he'll succeed so much, is because like he's not it's gonna be clear that he's not afraid to make mistakes. And that was evident last year, that he wasn't really ever afraid to put himself in a position to, fail, because you have to do that to be successful. But with a team around you that is so confident in you, that is openly saying that they're excited for you to be the starting point guard, like for a 15-year veteran, a guy that's won 3 championships, that went right ahead of you and say like, "I believe in this guy, he's going to be a star." Like that's a huge thing to say for a vet to say to like a second-year player, and a guy that's gonna have a big role this year. So I thought it was very good, and like you just love to hear that from Danny Green.
Yeah, 100%. And unsurprisingly, he handled all the Simmons questions well. Talked a little bit more about that too. Very cool. As far as goals for Danny Green, the way I set for me is the kind of more, I guess, however you want to scale it. One is just be the stable veteran and just grow in that role. I think coming back for a year or two, that it can continue to grow in that kind of leadership role and just being the guy that a lot of these young guys need to look up to, which is cool. And then another thing he talked about was that with Simmons out, that somebody else is going to need to step up as a primary defender. And he talked about himself in this role. And I absolutely do not want to see that happen. So that's my
No.
other goal, is just do not be the primary defender on a team's number one guy.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk about Matisse in a little bit, and I'm very interested to see what like the minute distribution is like between those two specifically, because they're so like Danny Green. I really, really like we saw it too many times of him being the main defender, like specifically on a guard. He just cannot do it anymore, and
Yeah.
it's no disrespect to him. At one point in time, he was a fantastic like all league defender. He's just not he doesn't have the spring in his step anymore to chase a guard around, like especially in like an NBA now that isn't, from the basket to 20 feet away. Like you have to guard a guy 35 feet from the basket, and you have to stick with him and fight through screens. Like the ability is just not there anymore, unfortunately for Danny. But he's just gonna have to be himself. He's just gonna have to do what he does. Basically, the only goal for me, I guess, for Danny is to just not fall off from his production last year. He's gonna get the same opportunities and this basically in the same spots. He's such a smart player that like he creates, as much as Joel Embiid attracts attention, he realizes that, and he plays so well off of that, that I don't think that his production will fall off. So basically, that's the only goal I have for Danny. Also, another thing is I wish that like I hate his podcast, like not even in a bad way. Like he's just like I just don't want to hear it. Like him and his I don't even remember the guy's name, that the co-host of that, but like
Harrison Stanford.
yeah, like he was openly like slandering Ben, and like I get it, I do get it, but like you have to realize that you are directly connected to a player that not only played with Ben, but is like in this situation right now. Like it's just not really the time or place. I don't think.
It is interesting to me, like the line, and obviously media has become so fluent, and with so many players being involved in
Yeah.
things. But just to stand up there and like talk about your teammate like getting traded and how it's hard going to camp because like you don't know who the team's gonna be and stuff, which all very true. And both of
Yeah.
them are very well spoken and know their things. But it's just kind of a weird kind of in between situation. So it's definitely interesting to me. But yeah. To transition to the final starter, Seth Carey. I don't got a lot on Seth. It was pretty by the
Yeah.
book answers. The one thing I did think was notable was he was asked if he thinks he could take on more of a role as a passer, and his quote was, "quote I've done it my whole life. I mean, people see me shoot, but there's a lot of different layers to my game. I pride myself on being a versatile player." So maybe a little growth in some more on-ball action for Seth. He did show some flashes of it last year. And anything else you thought of about Seth?
Yeah, I mean, his press conference was very, like, forgettable. I
Yeah.
thought, like, there was really nothing that stood out, with that, like, and not in a bad way. Like, he's very much just himself, and, like, I'm very excited for Seth, and again, with the opportunity of a little bit more of offensive production from him and what we saw from him in the playoffs, like, his bag is deep, like, way deeper than most of us realize, and, you know, like not great finisher around the basket, but like crafty and creative there. Fantastic mid range shooter. Like he gets a lot of buckets from that middle range. And then again, we all know what he can do outside the arc. So I'd love to see more pick and roll actions with him as the ball handler, just because he's such a threat that he creates so much for the roller. And like, I don't know, I don't have too much because it was just like basically I'm Seth Curry, I'm ready to get to work, and that's just
Yeah.
that. I mean, that was a good way to do it, but yeah, I don't have too much other than I'm very excited for him because I feel like there is an opportunity for him to like just his role to grow because I don't even think that he has to do more than he's capable of. I just think that he wasn't asked to do that much last year.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it's better to have a forgettable press conference than saying something wrong. So nothing wrong with that. As far as my goal for him, I set at 3+ assists per game. His career high is 2.7. I think he's going to kind of be forced in this role. I definitely think it's going to be kind of a point guard by committee, at least to start the
Yeah,
season. And so I think he can. That's a very doable goal, and I'd love to see it. To jump to, we'll go to Furkan next. Again, just
I
love.
loved it.
I love his
I
charm.
loved it.
I love everything about him. So first off, his quote on Ben, quote, "I love Ben. I love playing with him on the court. He is still a part of us. He is still a Sixer. So I hope everything is going to be well for him." And then one more on Ben was, quote, "I just wish him a healthy and good life. I'm on his back," which just gotta love
So
it.
funny.
Yeah, gotta love it. And then another awesome thing is they talked about the hype video by Furkan, which was
Yeah.
absolutely electric. And his comments on that were, "My team in Turkey did a good job." And then, quote, "I'm happy about the video. I watched the video a lot." So just lovable. Just
Yeah.
absolutely love Furkan. It's kind of more of a happy to have him back as a morale thing than I don't know how much on court growth I still see at this point, but I think he does his job well. He knows his role, and I'm glad he's still around.
Yeah, dude, I mean, we're huge Furcon guys here. Pick Swap Pod is very much into Furcon as a player, and he's such a good guy, and that was hilarious, like so unintentionally funny throughout that entire thing, and just saying that like he loved the video and saying how much he loved Ben. Like it was just a very like I was like, nice, like we're back, like
Yeah,
the Furcon's here. Like it was very nice to see him back and him excited to be back with the Sixers because I feel like I feel like he deserves it a little bit to be back, and I like he's such like I mean he wasn't good in the playoffs. He was very like meh, but he's a very good regular season player. I think as a rotational piece, he's pretty valuable, and like there was some growth last year. There was
for
like
sure.
a little bit of extending his game and doing a little bit more on the dribble and getting to the rim a little bit, and he is capable of doing that. So again, I think like we talked about, there's not really that next man up mentality as much, but it's more of like everyone is gonna get to do a little bit more. So it's either do it now or forever hold your peace. So Furkan could be another guy that I see stepping up a little bit and doing a little bit more, but I expect him to be the same old Furkan, killing everyone on the pump fakes, a little bit of dunks here and there, which I love a Furkan dunk, and like he's just a very lovable guy, and I'm very happy that he's back.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have any real specific goals. Just continue to make strides defensively, and I also feel like there could be a
Yeah,
Furkan just hot streak coming. I feel like there hasn't
yeah,
been a time where he's just been absolutely red hot for several games in a
yeah,
while. So I think one of those during the season would be awesome to see.
absolutely.
To transition to Shake Milton. So Shake talked about he prioritized defense this offseason, and about that he said, "quote I want to be on the court when it matters most." And he said he also focused on threes and adding muscle. So what did you get from Shake?
First thing was the damn, I look pretty swole. That was
Yeah,
funny from him. I was very intrigued by Shake's press conference because it was like he seemed locked in. And like you don't hear too much from Shake very often, and you don't like he's just not like he's not the first guy that everyone's like, "Oh, let's talk to Shake." So it wasn't very much like it wasn't a crazy thing or anything, but he just seemed very focused, and he seemed to have a pretty good goal in mind. And it's been such a roller coaster ride with Shake. At first being a nobody, you expect nothing from him. He has that little, the outburst against LA and that whole thing, and the end of that season where it was like, oh, Shake might be very important to this team. And then there was last year where it was like sixth man of the year and then not getting minutes at all. Like it's just been this up and down for him, and it's as good as I think he is, I don't know where he falls in this rotation, and it's so difficult to know what he's going to be like going forward. And maybe there's a Shake comeback in the works, but I really don't know. So I'm excited for Shake. I'm excited to see like the beginning of this season is like I think it's going to be very important and very fun, and very telling of what the rest of the year looks like. But I think he's a guy that is, I think it's clear to him too that it's your spot to lose at this point. I feel like for Shake, like if he isn't playing well, there are guys behind him ready to take that spot over. So, if he doesn't play well, I think we see Isaiah Joe a little bit more. I think we see some other guys a little bit more. But if he does play well, I think Shake could be a prominent part of this team.
yeah. I think last year, by the standards we kind of put for him, was a pretty poor
Yeah.
year for Shake. So he averaged 13 points. I still think there's more in just being like a pop off the bench scorer that he can provide, and I think that's going to be his role again, at least to start. So my goal for him is 15 plus points per game, which I think that's reasonable. That's two more than he averaged last year in what was a
Yeah.
bad year. It's still not a terrible year, but I think he's capable of more. So I'm excited. I hope Shake bounces back and comes back to being the player that we thought he could be.
Yeah,
Uh,
and the thing is, sorry, just one more thing. Like, he has the physical qualities of a good defender.
for
Like,
sure.
such long arms, and if he does
Wingspan.
get stronger, he has been thin, like a smaller frame, but like he definitely does has the physical capabilities of being a solid defender. So, like when you think about it in a guy like we talked about Danny Green and his maybe him, not playing so much or being the top defender, like we don't want to see that.
Yeah.
So whether it's Matisse, who, we'll get to him obviously, but like doesn't have as much of an offensive game as Shake, but Shake obviously is not the defender that Matisse is, and there aren't many players in the league that are. But if he could be a good quality defender, and if he's able to just like, I think all he needs to do is kind of just like condense his game most of the times. Like I think when he gets in trouble and when he starts playing poorly is when he tries to do too much or is like trying to be like, oh, I need to do something crazy. It's my time to be an ISO scorer. Like if he can work himself out of that and stay condensed, I think Shake has the chance to be in the rotation or even in the games late game.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, we'll go to Georges Niang. So, quote by him, quote, the main reason I'm here is I was able to have a conversation with Doc Rivers during free agency. Doc also referred to him as the silent pickup that he believes will help. Niang also echoed a common phrase from Tyrese Maxi, the quote, getting 1% better every day. He said he believes he can play the small ball five. And also when talking about Philly fans in general, he said, quote, I'm a Northeast kid, so I know how the city of Philadelphia works. I'm focused on how I can make this team better. So cool. All great outlooks from Niang. I definitely think he's going to turn into a fan favorite kind of guy. And I love him here. I think he's Mike Scott plus, which is all we can ask for.
Yeah, I'm very excited for Niang. I think he's going to be a perfect fit. Um, it just, I mean, like, think about it. Like, think about him alongside Joel Embiid. And, like, if that's your four, a guy that's shooting 40% from anywhere, like, beyond the arc, it's very dangerous. And he can play four, maybe he can play the five. And I think that was a disappointing part about what Doc said is that there was kind of a plan to play Ben with him, and that would have been a very good fit. But, even just thinking about him with this team and Joel Embiid and even the second unit, um, like having a guy like Matisse who's not a great shooter, but your four or your five is shooting 40% from beyond the arc, like that is never ever a bad thing. So I'm very excited for his fit here, and he seems like a very good quality guy and another good veteran presence in the locker room.
Yeah, definitely. I'm super happy with what he brings. He seems genuinely excited to play next to
Yeah,
Joel Embiid, which I think is very cool. And he's a little bit undersized for kind of the role I think we have kind of pinpointed him as. So I wouldn't be surprised if we even go a little bigger and play him at the three at times, which I'm
yeah,
also cool with because he's just an objectively good shooter. And then
yeah.
for my goal for him, I'm just want a 40+% from three this year, which that sounds like a lot, but he's a 40.4% 3-point shooter in his career. He shot 42.5% last year on 4.1 attempts, and he should be able to do that. But people forget how to shoot when they come to Philly pretty often, so you never know.
Yeah, I mean, he just has to be himself, really. I
Yeah,
think he has to just come in here and, like, maybe through the first couple games, it's a little bit, rusty here or there, but I think just getting in here early in camp, getting started, and just, you know, carving himself out a role and just doing what he does. No one's asking him to do more than just be himself, be what he's advertised as. So I think he'll be very good.
yeah, absolutely. Matisse Thybulle. So first off, the first question on Ben, his reply to that was, or if it would be like a distraction to the team, he said, "quote It's as much of a distraction as you guys want it to be." And then, obviously, I love Matisse, but and maybe things were just a little too stressful for him, but he was a little more snippier for this media day than he usually is, and especially to a friend of the podcast, Austin Krell, with his
Yeah.
question going back there. But still love for Matisse. He spoke very highly of his time with the Olympics. He talked about like his different usage there and the confidence that went along with that, which I thought was very cool. And what are your thoughts on your guy?
Yeah, I don't obviously no disrespect to Krell. I thought he was very good on the pod, but that was like very funny to me. Like
Yeah,
he seems so fed up with it, and I don't know if you listened to his podcast with JJ Redick that he did last week, but that
I
was
think
like
JJ. I think JJ's rubbing off on him a little bit.
JJ is rubbing off on him a little bit. JJ's a dick. JJ, I loved Redick while he was here, but he just is kind of a dick, and maybe that maybe you need a little bit more of that with Matisse.
True.
It could help him a little bit, but I mean, Matisse is himself. There's with what we saw in the Olympics, I think there is a lot more to him than what we see. And again, with the potential play out of this and who's going to play at what times, like I think again, Matisse's ability and what he puts out on the floor is up to him. And if like, I think Doc needs to use him in the right way. I will be very upset and like Doc has a lot to prove to me personally. Not that that means too much, but like as a coach, he has a lot to prove in terms of how he uses these guys. Because if we see what Matisse was able to do in the Olympics, and not in the Olympics that like he's playing against scrubs, like it wasn't like he was at a pro-am and it's like, oh, Matisse scored 30 in a pro-am, like that's expected.
Mhm.
He was playing against the best teams in the world. He did it against the United States team. He did it against France. Like this is a guy that went out as obviously a more prominent offensive part of what they were doing with the Boomers, but like, dude, he has the ability to really impact the game on both ends of the floor. Obviously, defensively, it's going to be there, but offensively, he needs to not be a minus. Like that's really the biggest thing. He needs to not just be, someone that you don't care or worry about at all. Let him be a disruptor. Let him get to the rim. Let him cut to the basket. Like if I'm not seeing that early on, that is very indicative of what Doc Rivers is as a coach.
Yeah, there's definitely more to unlock than has been so far with the Sixers that Australia showed. Just his screen and roll ability, his cutting. There's a lot of things there that are to be excited about, and even ball handling and passing, he showed flashes of, which has never been the case with the Sixers. As far as a goal for his role here, the first thing I want to say is just improve discipline on defense. His fouling jump shooters is more of an issue than has been acknowledged, and that's something that he needs to work on.
Yep.
He brought it up himself, which I'm happy to hear that he at least is acknowledging it. And then offensively. Uh, I just set it as 34+% from three, which is a very reasonable clip. That's
Yeah.
respectable enough that you have to at least guard him, and that's enough to keep him on the floor. In his 2 years so far, he shot 35.7% the first year and 30.1% last year. So I'd love for that to bounce back a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that all comes again from really him. He gets open shots. Like he just needs to hit open shots. And again, I think that's something that will come along. And I guess, I mean, I don't have like a specific goal for Matisse. I just want him to be as aggressive offensively as he is defensively. Don't change the aggressiveness level from one end of the floor to the other. Just find a way to get your hands on the ball. And he's so like quick twitch athletic. Like he can get to the rim at any time and, get him on back cuts, get him just going for offensive rebounds, like anything like that. He has the capability of doing. So I just need to see more of that from him. And like, if he's able to give you I don't even know, 6 points per game, shooting 35% and doing like just being active offensively. Like he's a very different player that provides so much for you.
Definitely. And now a guy I still haven't fully accepted is the 76er, Andre Drummond. Uh, so his first quote I have from him is, quote, "I think Doc was very smart for taking a chance on getting me. I have a lot left to offer." On Joel Embiid specifically, when we're talking about their kind of beef in the past, quote, "We're like Titans. We just clash. We play hard against each other. It's just basketball. What beef can you really have?" So cool that that's kind of putting behind him. He said it was a kind of an unspoken thing between him and Embiid that they haven't really acknowledged. But he also seemed okay with having a smaller role, which I think is the biggest thing that should have been looking for.
Yeah, and I think that was pretty obvious with him signing here was him knowing like, Embiid's at least at the very very least is the second best center in the world. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of us view him as the best center in the world. So he knows that he's not coming in here competing for a starting spot. Like he knew that, and he wouldn't have signed here if he thought otherwise. Like, so I mean, he's going to be Dwight Howard in Dwight Howard's role, just probably better, better rebounder, and a guy that just doesn't need the ball. Like, and I think that's an important piece to it all. And you kind of thought at the beginning that he would be running with Maxi and those guys. It seems like he probably won't be, but like as a second unit center, just play defense, don't foul, get rebounds, and I'd rather be like I didn't realize that Andre Drummond played last night. Like that's the kind of role I kind of see him in, and if he's okay with that, if he just wants to play winning basketball and be a silent producer, that's totally fine with me. And if that's his role, then I think that's what he's going to be very good at. So I'm like low key pretty excited about Andre Drummond, which is a very very weird thing for me to say.
Yeah, very. My goals for him is first off, just stay in your lane, just do
Yep.
your thing, don't do too much, and then just less than 20 minutes per game, which has never been done in his career. But it concerns me a great deal that Doc Rivers talked about how excited he was to have him, and just I'm concerned that Doc is going to play him far too much, and if him and Embiid ever step on the floor together, I might question my whole
I
belief
quit.
in this franchise. But
Yeah.
but
Well,
uh,
Doc is a jackass, bro. Like, like he would do something like that. Like, I just like I don't know. Like again, the idea of Andre Drummond to me is very fine. Like he's just
yeah,
very fine here. What what concerns me about basically all of this is the way that Doc is going to use them. So never in a million years should they step on the floor together at the same time. Like really, he shouldn't even have his sweats off if Embiid is on the like if Embiid is playing, he should have towels on the neck. Like he should be on the bench chilling, like not even worried about stepping on the floor until Embiid's calling for a sub. Like there
yeah.
should be no world that they even think about it. And you have other options is the biggest thing. If you really need to play two bigs, Niang's there. Paul Reed is there. Don't think about Drummond. And if you do, I really question it. Like I really, really do.
Yeah, the guy whose growth I guess I'm biggest concerned that it might stunt is B-Ball Paul. And to talk about him a little bit. So he said his three goals going into this year were to help the Sixers compete for a championship, playing the rookie versus sophomore game during All-Star weekend, and then shoot 45% from three, which is a super high bar, but
Yeah.
maybe he's capable. And then when he was asked about kind of how well liked he's become, his quote was, "It's surreal. I wasn't expecting people to like me that much. Every time I go on social media, they're showing me a lot of love and enthusiasm," which, again, you just absolutely have to love B-Ball Paul. And he also mentioned how motivated that he has been through the work of Tyrese Maxi and Isaiah Joe from last year.
Yeah. I mean, again, he's such a lovable guy, and it's nice to know that there are a lot of characters and personalities on this team that mesh well and play well together. And Maxi already showing that he's a leader in some capacity is really encouraging. So I'm interested to see how many minutes he gets, how he plays in with the Sixers this year because it's hard to tell what he's going to be like. But you know, B-ball Paul is B-ball Paul, and it's going to be interesting to see what his role is like this year. Because I mean, we've been high on him for a while, and he's such an interesting guy. Like if he plays well, the entire city will just like
Love him.
fall. Like they already do love him. Everyone already does kind of like love him, but it's kind of like a quirky like backdoor kind of love thing. It's like you love him for what he is, but if he plays well on top of being that lovable personality, you know, it's going to be hard to dislike him at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And my goals for him is more than 15 minutes per game. He played 6.8 minutes per game last year over 26 games. I just genuinely really want him to be that small ball option, and I think he's good enough. I think he's ready, and I want to see it happen. And now,
Yeah.
last guy, Isaiah Joe. He said he's 100% recovered from his ankle sprain. He prioritized working on ball handling and playmaking this offseason. And quote from him is, quote, I strive to be the best shooter on the court at all times. Thoughts on Isaiah Joe?
Yeah, I love Isaiah Joe. I think he's an important piece going forward. I just don't really see too much of a role for him this year outside of like the main rotation. It's just going to be difficult to find getting all of these wings in the game behind like Curry, DG, Matisse, Furk, Shake. Like there's just a lot of guys that are kind of lined up in front of him, and there's definitely a niche. There's definitely a need for his abilities, and I think going forward, again, what they've talked about for so long is like we love the core that we have. We love the young core of guys that are coming up, and I think thinking about going forward, he's a very very important piece to them. So while like I don't think he's going to be like used all that often this year, I don't think he's undervalued in the franchise.
Yeah, I think he has a chance to overhop for a count in the rotation. And I think that's on the table at least. My goal for him is 38% plus from deep. He shot 36.8% last year on 2.6 attempts, which is impressive volume for the limited minutes that he produced. And it's tough for given limited minutes, just how off the splits can be, just because there just aren't that many, aren't that much data to go off. So
Yeah.
that could be around. But hopefully Isaiah Joe gets on his feet.
Yeah, and I think he will. I think even if it's not this year, it definitely will be next year. Like it's just hard, you know, when you have I think they have like 14 guys that are very capable of being on an NBA court at any given minute, and that's something that for the regular season is very, very good, but for Doc Rivers in the postseason is very, very bad.
Mhm.
So, it could be a blessing and a curse at times, but I think Isaiah Joe is definitely like if he's the 14th guy on your bench, you're like, oh my gosh, like we are very deep in terms of like playable guys. So, while it might not be this year, I do expect it to be in the near future. So I think Isaiah Joe will get his burn at some point.
Yeah, agreed. And overall, just thrilled moving forward. This young core is awesome, and I'm hyped that Sixers basketball back. It felt good to kind of be back in the swing of it with media stuff yesterday, and that training camp is now underway. So I'm super excited moving forward, and I guess I have hope again. So, any last thoughts from you, James?
Yeah, I mean, this is the storybook, the way it goes, like very depressing end of the year. I mean, the turmoil this summer was unexpected, but you know, it, nothing surprises you as a Philadelphia fan anymore. Just this is the way it goes, and it's hard to not go into this year thinking, they could be good again. Like you have Joel Embiid, who's arguably the best player in the world or a top 5 player in the league, and you have a bunch of other guys that are also very promising. And there's guys like they have a good mix of like vets, guys that have been around, and guys that are leaders and know what they're doing, and then other guys that still have something to prove. And I mean, all of them have something to prove. They haven't won anything yet, so I'm excited. I'm excited. I can't help it, but it'll be very interesting to see the way everything plays out the next couple of weeks, and just the way that they're able to play with or without Ben Simmons going into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you guys watching. We'll be back for more next week, and hopefully have some more training camp details. And as always, trust the process.